welcome to Have Your Say. I'm Ann Minicozzi, president of the Community Breakfast Collaborative, and our co-host is Diana Robertson, president of the Mainline NAACP branch. And our guests today are Rev.Carolyn Cavaness, pastor of Bethel AME Church in Ardmore, and Leah Thompson. And both are here today to talk about community gardens. So welcome to you both, and thank you very much for being here. This is a topic that we've wanted to address for a long time. There seems to be a trend where people are developing community gardens, and it's good for food, but it's also good for the community. So thank you so much for being here. And Reverend Carolyn, can you just give a little bit of background first about yourself, and then also about the church, and then Leah next?
Well, thank you so much, Ann and Diana, for having me as a part today. And I am Carolyn Cavaness, and I am in my 6th year here as pastor of Bethel AME Church of Ardmore, the first female pastor in its 125-year history. I'm a native of Brick City, Newark, New Jersey, and a graduate of Haverford College and Union Theological Seminary in New York City. And certainly I've been very tremendously blessed by the way in which this community has embraced the work that I feel called to and very passionate about, and also being a bridge and connector and bringing folks together. I would have never thought that I would have catapulted myself into gardening. Being an urban girl, New York City, this was not part of what we did as family. However, in 2018, and having a conversation with leaders here at Bethel, we talked about our adjacent lot and how could we repurpose it. And so here we are, and we'll talk a little bit more about the development, but that's who I am, and an urban studies major undergrad. And so learning and how you work across and being very interdisciplinary, which I think is a very critical conversation, in particular given COVID-19, the intersectionality of so many different points of departure in this moment. So grateful to be here.
Thank you so much. And Leah, could you introduce yourself and give us a little bit of background?
Yes. Again, thank you for having me. My name is Leah Thompson. I recently graduated from Haverford College with the sociology major, health studies minor. For the last 4 years, I've been working at community and urban gardens in Philly and Ardmore, Haverford area. And yes, I've been a part of the project to place gardens in local neighborhoods in Ardmore, while also working on the actual garden plot at the church, which has been really fun just to meet the folks who come by and pick up produce, and getting to donate the produce to has been pretty a fun part of my job too. And also going to the plots throughout the neighborhood and working on those and meeting the community members. It's really cool to see people growing their own produce, and I'm very much interested in like sustainability methods. And right now, especially during COVID, it's really cool to see people also being interested in that and wanting to learn how to grow their own food and wanting to learn how to create sustainable food systems for themselves and their families. So yeah, thank you so much again for the opportunity to talk about this.
All right, this is great because you brought up a number of topics in your introduction, but I feel like we want to start at the very beginning of how you started the first garden, which is in the lot adjacent to the church, right? And could you say even what size that is? So, as people are watching this, they get a sense of what they would be able to attempt.
Sure. So literally, the lot adjacent to the church is the full width of the church. So from Sheldon Lane Street back to Walnut Avenue, it was purchased about 30 years ago to put a parking lot. And I'm still trying to dream as to what how that would have been possible. If anybody knows South Ardmore and the streets and but nevertheless, was repurposed into a community garden. And so we started off with 9 raised beds, and we've been a part of Trellis for Tomorrow, which is a um, phenomenal organization based in Phoenixville, which helps to merge the conversation not only around nonprofits, but also corporate partners around gardening, but also a strong commitment that 50% of whatever is produced is given right back into local food pantries and partners through their Food for All program. And Trellis's goal, and what I appreciated was, we had a vision, but they come with the technical expertise and the technical assistance. So when it came to, measuring the plot, where it makes sense, what kind of soil do you use, what's the time frame? I mean, it really helped us to take a vision, a dream, and really bring it to reality. Additionally, in 2018, they were very interested, one, because we were a congregation of color, community of color. And in this space around gardening and food insecurity, there aren't a lot of African Americans, people of color at the table. And so helping to diversify, and also we're seeing in COVID-19, now to fast forward 3 years later, that there has been a major push around supporting Black and Brown farmers, also Black and Brown gardens that are, being led by these constituencies. And also we move into a topic which I'm sure we'll bring up around seed justice, food sovereignty, food justice. How do we go about, providing a sustainable ecosystem as it relates to the food chain? And so we started off with 9 beds, and the idea is that we would produce 100 pounds per bed, which we exceeded in our first year. And then last year, which was our second year, we added 3 beds, and then a really neat kind of trellis system, which is literally like an arch. We had 2 beds. So even right now, we have literally in about, I guess, Shalane, about 2 or 3 weeks, we're literally going to have vines of tomatoes going up and down, and vines up and down of cucumbers. And it's just, it's a very cool kind of talking place. And also, what we have found when folks come to visit us or to work, we've often come like a garden. So, people are looking at like, wow, you guys are doing all these interesting techniques. You're mixing, kale, you're growing kale and peppers in the same bed. How do you do that? What type of strains, what soil? So that has also been a really neat, that the space has allowed for us not only to produce, but also to teach and also to share. And so we also have become, compost is readily available to folks. We had an abundance of plants at one point, and we would just tell people just come by and take them, the starters. So it really has taken on a life of its own. And to me, given the change that we are experiencing in South Ardmore, this has been a creative bridge. And adding to just the overall aesthetic of the locale. And so it's just, a lot of folks, as Shalay even mentioned, like they'll just stop and just look, or to see, parents with their children in strollers, just stopping and talking about the plants that they see. I mean, so I think, in a moment where the church building is closed, that people are still seeing the way in which growth is happening, life is still happening, resurrection is still happening, and that we're meeting very fundamental needs. So this garden experience has hit many different, and it's really, as I mentioned before, taken on a life of its own. And here we are.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that is. Do you have sessions, or, I'm just thinking as I was listening to you and you talked about people seeing things, and maybe that's arousing an interest that they might say like, oh, I don't know if I could ever do anything like that. But maybe I could. Are there like sessions that people could gather and get certain basic information?
So we've been using the website to help us do that. We're given COVID-19, and so we have an amazing web designer who's put up all kinds of videos, relative to just some key basic skills, and also we have become in many ways like a hub of garden support. So we're part of PHS has a city harvest program which supports community gardens. Really, it's been predominant for gardens in Philadelphia. We're one of the first that they've done outside of the city limits. And so, for example, the starters that they provided, the seeds and all they provided, those were the initial plants into all the gardens that we built outside of the church. So that helped to expand their reach. And so so that's, and then it came to the compost and how we have all this different access. So helping other gardeners, either institution or individuals, get started because we're on these different networks that we're helping to leverage. Also that Ardmore is urban gardening. As much as we are suburbanites, this does fit the mold of urban gardening and agriculture. And so, and then we get to the conversation around food insecurity, which we know in our community is not tracked as profoundly as others. We do know that folks need access, and even when food pantries will even say like the first thing that usually goes is fresh produce. If you ask any, folks are just grabbing for, and then to see the cost of even in this moment, what an heirloom tomato will cost and how we're growing it right outside, right? Or there's access like to green tomatoes, which you can't usually find, but here we have them. So we'll, in fact, there are a couple people that come to mind that last couple of years have asked, but like because of COVID, they're not, around. So there's, access to, or you just want a mini eggplant. You don't want the real big one.
Right.
And so to have that variance that we're able to, and then we know that, collard greens is very, very popular. So we have 2 beds of those going.
You have some kale?
We have kale. We do.
Okay.
So you're growing some things then that are, nutritious, obviously. Do you grow some things that are easier to grow, like some vegetables that are more efficient to grow, that are nutritious, and then also some interesting different things like the heirloom tomatoes, things like that, and green tomatoes that people might be looking for because you can't get those in the grocery store.
You want to take that on?
Yeah, how do you decide, like, what do you start with?
Yeah. Well, I actually recently started working there since COVID started. And I was working from the template of what trellis had left over in the beds. And with crops, you have to be mindful of crop rotation. And so basically what existed in the bed before affects the soil for the next crops. And a lot of the previous beds had potatoes, which are actually kind of difficult to grow because you have to do this piling method where you add compost and dirt, and they like to be buried. So after pulling up those potatoes, I put down beans, especially because they like to grow in the heat. And right now it's like midsummer. And they're actually pretty easy to grow. And a lot of the neighborhood plots, there were also bean plants already growing. So yeah, that's something that's easy to pick, and they grow pretty fast. And you can have a crop yield in like less than 2 months.
Okay, so when you're talking about the potatoes versus the green beans, the potatoes pull the nutrients from the ground, and the green beans, because they're a legume, they put nitrogen into the ground. So then you're doing that crop rotation so that you keep having fertile soil. Yeah, this is great because
being mindful of these different kinds of methods, and even whenever I'm doing volunteer sessions, because we have volunteer sessions every Monday and a couple every now and then throughout the week. And even when I'm going and meeting with the folks in the neighborhood, I try to give them tips, and also like sharing skills, I think, is another really cool thing about community gardening. You get to share knowledge that otherwise I feel like would be kind of hard to access, or you wouldn't really know where to look. And because farming is like, and gardening is like hands-on, I think that that's another avenue of like learning and knowledge that it brings to the community. And yeah, these methods have been within our communities for such a long time, but food inaccessibility, food insecurity has kind of cut us off from this. So yeah.
Yeah. I think the other thing we have to make sure to talk about is that, which we started to talk about before we started to record, is you started one garden in 2018, but now there's so many more gardens that you all have started. So what was the number of gardens that you have now? That
We're at about 35. We're calling them home victory gardens, neighborhood plots. So one idea was, in response to COVID, and I have been toying with this notion, and so to see COVID it being confirmed. Food pantries only account when it comes to food insecurity about maybe 3%. So we still have an issue around people having access to food. And then we think about healthy, nutritious food, right? So there's been a movement, CHOP, for example, has started a movement around a food pharmacy by Dr. Saba Khan, who's a local resident here in Lower Marion, that food can heal, right? So it's not enough that here's your prescription, go pick this up, but also, these are also some, food choices that could be very helpful to you, okay? So it's not enough to give the person a prescription and think that's gonna heal their problem. It's a holistic method circle. Secondly, that many times, and many of us have probably heard these kind of scenarios where there have been these studies where they look at the content of a food pantry bag. And you think about the sodium, carb, the nutritional value. So yes, I am providing this bag of food, which some of it you may not even like.
yeah.
But this is the bag I'm giving to you. You take it, and it may be creating other problems. And that's a short-term solution. Now, I am not saying that I'm against food pantries. I think that is needed, but also how do we talk about sustainability? So I recall even going into kind of a back and forth with someone even about gift cards. Like, oh, we'll just give them a gift card to a restaurant. I'm like, but giving a family a garden is much more sustainable. And so it's been really neat, especially for the first wave of gardens that we built. Folks are literally going out like, okay, so tonight for my dinner, I'm going to add that tomato. Or, I had went by a garden on Greenfield Avenue, and so she had a red cabbage. She said, oh, Reverend, I'm just trying to get it bigger. I said, ma'am, I need you to take that cabbage out now because it's starting to bulk. And if the longer, so I'm sure she took my advice and took it out, and she had it for dinner. Or there was a cool picture from a family. They were making tacos, and so they used the kale. There was and they made all these interesting kind of concoctions, and that added to their plate that night. And that's where we want to see people go with this, right? So that food pantries are needed, but also how do we go about sustainable systems? And that gardening works for any, age group. We, one of the, remarks, I can't bend over, I'm a little older. So we actually made a bed on an upright bed, if you will, that are on stilts. So the person who had a disability and a back issue didn't have to do as much going down. So trying different ways of, and, what is it that you want to grow? So that's one of the questions we ask. But also we throw in some things that may not be automatically part of your palate, because we want to expose you, to some other, and what do I do with this? How do I cook this? So, COVID catapulted that this would be our church's response, and to know that these gardens will be there next year. And so now, preparing for the next wave, as Shalea mentioned, we'll be getting ready for the fall planting in a couple of weeks. And then given, how the climate has been, last year was an interesting year for our garden. We thought we would close it down in November. We never did. We never had to because the climate cooperated, and we were still growing kale and all kinds of stuff literally up to March until we had to, turn the soil to get ready for our spring planting in April. So we'll be exploring that as well with our families if they would be willing, to try going a full year or, closing up around Thanksgiving time. So to have these, 35 beds, 20 of which, when we want to give a shout out to the Montgomery County Department of Health and Human Services, who provided us an equipment grant. And so we built with them 20 gardens, and the other 15 we have built and/or we have resurrected gardens. So we were around, we would see families might have like a really cool stone structure. So we helped turn it and then repurposed it for a garden, as well as helping some of our local organizations here who had garden beds but did not have soil or plants. And so we brought it to them, turned it over, and now they're growing. So that's also been part of the work too. And then also moving closer to the conversation around container gardens, which is a key. There is called the Bullock Garden Project in Glassboro, New Jersey. So we've partnered with them, and we have it on our Facebook page. We did an online webinar, if you will, on how to do container gardens. So we've just, kind of been exploring different options, because sometimes you may not have the space, you may be a tenant, and your landlord may not be willing to have a bed, but there are other ways that you can still grow.
Yeah.
How about what's involved, or can you, for the vegetables and all that's being grown, are there ways to harvest that and store it in such a way that you can have some of that for the winter?
Sure. So one, I know we had a friend of ours, Adrian Seltzer. So aside from her,
Oh yeah, Adrian.
chef, so last year she preserved, I want to say, like, she took 25 of our tomatoes and made this really neat. In fact, I'm not a tomato eater, so I have to be transparent. But I passed on to one of our members here, and she's like, "Oh, Reverend, this was absolutely divine." So I think that would be a really cool kind of how do we go into canning and preservation. And here again, I think it brings up these topics around, training and educating. And I'm sure, Shalea, you have some techniques. There's a movement because there had been a shortage of seeds, as to how you can, and Shalea, I'm probably saying this all wrong, but you can take your plants and get the seeds from them, and then you put them like in the refrigerator. So Shalea, take it from there about, and all that.
Yeah, seed saving. It's another really cool practice within food sustainability that allows you to save your seeds that come from your crop yields, and also the seeds that you save are going to grow better the next time that you plant them in that soil, because that's where the parent plant was from. So yes, saving them in the refrigerator, drying them out, putting them on a dry rack, are all techniques that are useful to beginner gardeners, I think. And then when it comes to preserving, there's canning methods, there's pickling methods, there's drying methods that people can use so that their crop yields last throughout the fall and winter seasons.
Yeah, pickles are my favorite right now. I even pickled radishes just with sugar and sugar, 1 part sugar, 1 part water, and then the apple cider vinegar, and just put them in the refrigerator, slice the radishes, and they were good. And so I've been bought some more apple cider vinegar to pickle whatever I can get my hands on, beets and all those other kind of things. Yeah, that's my favorite. And then just putting things in the freezer, like stewed tomatoes or something like that. I haven't gotten to the canning yet. Just doing some things simply. But the other thing, and we're going to have to wrap up pretty soon, is the community that is formed around all of these gardens. And we did talk about it some, but your recipe sharing, you're sharing all different produce, and now in terms of fall planting, if Shalea, if you could just say for a second, like what things, since when this is going to be aired, will be even closer to fall planting, like what would just be quickly like a few things that people should plant in the fall?
Yeah, so midsummer, late summer is a good time to start growing different varieties of squash, pumpkin, corn, beans, and basically any kind of gourd. Like gourds grow, melons grow really well right now, and they'll be ready around October, November. So yeah, pretty good things to grow.
Yeah.
And they're festive, so it'll be really pretty to decorate the house with too. So.
Well, it seems like this is great. This is a great conversation. We can go on and on. And where can Reverend Carolyn, where can people get information on the gardens and looking up the information?
Sure. So I'll invite us to our website, www.ardmorevictorygardens.org. And there's a couple signups there. There are videos there. Also, if you'd like to make a donation. Also, we are always taking donations of plants as well as garden tools. So we had helped, like, when, she wanted to give it all, and they come in handy. So if you have garden tools, starters, soil, we're happy to take it because we're helping others to get started. Financial donation, and also there are always volunteer opportunities. So yeah.
Okay. Well, great. It was wonderful having the two of you on today. And certainly this sounds like a conversation that could continue on, but hopefully that everyone who is listening, if they have not done any gardening in this way before, that they will be inspired to at least try and to see what they are able to produce. So once again, we thank the audience for listening in. Hopefully you gained a lot of information and inspiration to see what you're able to grow. We look forward to everybody being able to have your say. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.